Lines now this Friday night. It's the ITV News at 10.
Extending ULEZ is lawful, the courts rule, leaving the Labour Party with a dilemma.
Get card out! Get card out! Get card
The opposition's failure to win in Uxbridge was blamed on the low-emission zone's expansion. Now Sadiq Khan says he will go ahead and roll it out over Greater London. Is this an election gift to the Tories?
This is not about using clean air as a political football. This is about bringing in policies that will support Londoners.
Just because he's got the power to expand ULEZ across Greater London doesn't mean he should.
We will be looking at what this means for both parties' wider green agendas at the next election, also tonight. The tragic death of a baby in a prison cell whose mother's cries went unanswered. Kyiv celebrates another advance even as Russian missiles strike a residential block in Dnipro. John will be here to analyse the progress of Ukraine's grinding counter-offensive. First Nigel Farage, now Gina Millers. The Remain supporter says her party's bank account is the latest to be shut down, this time by Monzo. Edinburgh Festival's first female and first Scottish director says she's going to do things differently.
The dream for me was always to contribute to the cultural landscape of Scotland in the most full way that I possibly could.
This is ITV News at 10 with Romilly Weeks.
Good evening. Making green policies appeal has always been a challenge for politicians, but with the warnings about the state of our climate growing ever more severe, it's a task the government and Labour must confront at the next election. One, though, which is undoubtedly made even harder during a cost of living crisis. Just ask London's mayor. Sadiq Khan's plan to extend the city's ultra-low emission zone was today ruled lawful. It expands the area in which people with more polluting vehicles face a daily charge. But that victory has not been without cost for his party. Many within Labour blame ULEZ for their defeat in the recent Uxbridge by-election. And it's meant both them and the Conservatives reconsidering how to address concerns about the climate without losing votes.
Get card out! Get card out!
It's a controversial policy to say the least, and protesters today were making it clear how unhappy they are as the courts rejected a challenge from 5 Tory-led councils to stop the expansion of London's ultra-low emission zone.
We do not want ULEZ. It's an undemocratic imposition.
More people will now have to pay £12.50 to drive non-compliant cars around London in an attempt to reduce pollution and improve air quality. It's already had a huge impact on handyman Kane Lever, who's decided with his family to move out of the city altogether.
How stressful has it been?
Massively stressful. Pulling my hair out, stressful. I mean, blood pressure, stressful. I can't trade in this area because of ULEZ. It is as simple as that. If I can't trade, the kids don't get fed. £12.50 a day is an absolute ridiculous charge, and it's a killer to businesses.
And 65.
ULEZ was the main talking point in the Uxbridge by-election last week, which Labour narrowly lost. And it's caused a split at the top of the party between the London mayor and the national leadership.
This is not about using clean air as a political football. This is about bringing in policies that will support Londoners, make the transition towards a city where our air doesn't lead to around 4,000 premature deaths a year, children having stunted lungs, adults with a whole host of health issues.
But senior figures within the party in Westminster say the mayor needs to reconsider.
Keir Starmer has set out concerns about particularly the impact on cost of living and asked the Mayor of London to look at this again.
And the issue of green policies appears to be becoming a dividing line between the two parties.
I don't have the power to stop this scheme. This scheme, the powers are devolved to the Mayor of London. It's his decision to go ahead with this scheme. Yes, he may have won in court, but just because he's got the power to expand ULEZ across Greater London doesn't mean he should and make life more difficult for people.
But election experts say policies like ULEZ don't need to be so unpopular.
Really, I think the lesson Labour should be taking and any political party should be taking is how to do these things well. How to make sure that they meet people's concerns for environmental protection, for clean air, for climate change mitigation measures, but doing it in a fair, well-communicated and supportive way, particularly in a time of a cost of living crisis.
With the general election looming, keeping voters on side will be key for Labour as they look to steer themselves towards Downing Street.
And Shihab joins me now to talk about all of this. Shihab, amid warnings of a climate emergency and the reality of a cost of living crisis, green policies and how we pay for them are going to be a major issue come the election, aren't they?
Absolutely. It's a balancing act between people having to pay to do certain things and also meeting those requirements. The Uxbridge by-election that took place last week was an indication of how divisive these policies can be. That was about clean air in particular. And having spoken to a number of Tory MPs today, they view that as quite a pivotal moment. It was a dividing line, an opportunity for the Tories to make some ground in a place where they thought they were going to lose the seat. I had one Tory backbencher tell me today that they want to get rid of most of the commitments the government has made just because it makes such a big dividing line. The fact that Keir Starmer's telling his Mayor of London to reconsider tells you that the Labour Party understand that it's not a particularly popular policy. But regardless of who ends up in Downing Street, there are major international commitments that have been made by the government that the UK has pledged to do to get their emissions down. As you say, as we head into the next big general election, given the cost of living crisis, given the fact that green policies are so important, I suspect this is something we're going to be talking quite a bit about.
I bet. Shihab, thank you. To some other news now, and a coroner today condemned systemic failures which led to the death of a baby whose teenage mother gave birth alone in prison. Some officers at HMP Bronzefield didn't even know Rihanna Cleary was pregnant. And on the night she went into labour, her agonised calls for help went unanswered. There have been changes since to ensure pregnant women receive better care behind bars, but campaigners say it's not enough.
Aisha Cleary never lived a day and never experienced life outside these prison walls. Her highly vulnerable and heavily pregnant teenage mother requested medical attention from her cell, but her calls were ignored and she gave birth alone. Today, a coroner said the baby's death may have been avoided, and her mother Rihanna agreed in a statement read by her lawyers outside the court.
Nothing can change the nightmare I went through or bring Aisha back. The deputy director of Bronzefield wrote one line to me saying, "Sorry you gave birth alone," just before the inquest started. If it wasn't for this inquest, they would still be blaming me for giving birth alone.
18-year-old Rihanna Cleary arrived at Bronzefield Women's Prison in Middlesex in August 2019, heavily pregnant. On the 26th of September, just after 8 p.m, she pressed the buzzer in serious pain, asking for medical help. At 8:32, she pressed it again, but no one answered. Rihanna later said she was in so much pain, she felt like she was having a seizure and she passed out in the night. She was checked twice by prison officers that night as part of a routine roll count, and the court heard nothing unusual was noticed. She was discovered the following morning after she had given birth. Attempts were made to resuscitate Aisha, but the only specialist equipment available was designed to fit adults, and she was pronounced dead just after 9 a.m. Rihanna Cleary was held here on remand and released just after her daughter's death. During the inquest, she questioned if she had been treated differently because she is black. That wasn't discussed as part of the coroner's conclusions today, but he did say there were systemic failures in the care she received. Some of those on duty didn't even know she was pregnant. There are now specialist mother and baby staff in every prison, but campaigners believe more needs to be done.
We know that more and more women are being held on remand while awaiting sentencing. Many of those women don't go on to receive a custodial sentence. The idea of having a pregnant woman in prison on remand awaiting sentencing must not be acceptable any longer.
Bronzefield say they have implemented effective changes since Aisha's death and are reviewing the coroner's conclusions. But campaigners are calling for even greater protection for pregnant women to ensure this never happens again. Amy Lewis, News at 10.
As if it were needed, there was a reminder tonight of the threat Russian missile strikes pose to Ukraine. A residential tower block and a security services building were hit in the city of Dnipro. Several people are thought to have been injured. On the front line, Moscow's forces are, in the words of one Ukrainian commander, fiercely clinging to every centimetre during Kyiv's counter-offensive. There does, though, appear to have been a significant success in the south of the country, and there are signs that more intense and crucial battles are underway. Well, John is here to take us through the latest. John.
Romilly, thanks. Well, you know, for several months now, tangible gains have been rare in this war, but Ukraine is celebrating something of a victory, the capture of a village called Sevenyearold, releasing these pictures of its troops that also hint of how tough the fighting has been for what is really just a few miles of occupied territory along a front line that stretches for 600 miles. Ukraine also claims to be taking back land to the north and to the south of Bakhmut, the town utterly destroyed by the Russian advance. And again, it is slow progress. But military analysts believe the main thrust of the counteroffensive is taking place in the south, in the Zaporizhia region, where Ukrainian forces have reached the outskirts of Robotyne, with the ultimate target of the city of Melitopol and onto the Sea of Azov. The aim is to cut off Russian-occupied Crimea. Among those leading the assault is the elite 47th Mechanised Brigade, a force of around 4,000 men trained in the UK, Poland and Germany and equipped with Western armour, like the German-made Leopard tank and the American Bradley fighting vehicle. They have penetrated the outer shell of Russian defences, though at a price, as these battlefield images show. Some stuck in anti-tank defences, and the Kremlin, which has released these pictures, claims to have destroyed 39 out of 50 Ukrainian armoured vehicles. Figures disputed by Ukraine, though their defence ministry is cautious about the progress that they are making.
We know how difficult it is for our armed forces to achieve that progress. We know that there are millions of mines along this long front line. We know that there is always a risk of the enemy drones, heavy artillery, missiles. So, of course, when we achieve steady progress, we are happy, and it reinstills confidence in our victory, which we are confident is inevitable.
Now, Ukraine is appealing for time, patience and weapons. It has reserves of all three, Romilly, but not an infinite supply.
And John, it's been more or less a stalemate for months now. Is it too early to say that that's been broken?
It is less of a stalemate, but just look at these images that show how the conflict is now baked into the very landscape. This satellite picture shows the marks left by war. That grey area is the dried up bed of the Kakhovka Reservoir, destroyed a few weeks ago, and that arc of deep green, well, that's unharvested land where it's too dangerous for agriculture, and hidden from our view there are some fearsome lines of Russian defences. The Ukrainians are pushing and probing and trying to find weaknesses, and when they do, to exploit them. And Romilly, they say they have still to commit the bulk of those Western supplied troops.
Right, John. Thank you for that. To the United States now, and much like the documents found at his Florida estate, the legal charges against Donald Trump are piling up. 3 more have been added, the latest accusation being that the former president asked an employee to delete security footage that prosecutors wanted. Mr. Trump's alleged mishandling of classified material is just one of several cases he's fighting, while simultaneously battling to win back the White House. As ever, he described the allegations as nothing more than a witch hunt.
The legal net around Donald Trump might have just tightened further. This was the moment officials swooped on his Florida estate last August, seizing over 100 classified documents. Photos released afterwards showed they were stored with minimal security. He's already appeared in Miami to deny the charges. But now prosecutors have updated their charges adding claims that Donald Trump conspired with his property manager, Carlos de Oliveira, to get rid of incriminating CCTV footage showing staff moving boxes. The investigation is also now focused on Trump's New Jersey golf course, where he was recorded bragging about a top-secret plan to attack Iran.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
Trump had denied having this document at all.
These boxes were interspersed with all sorts of things. Golf shirts, clothing, pants, shoes. There were many things. I would say much more, not that I know of, but not that I know of.
But now he's been charged under the Espionage Act with retaining that document for almost a year after leaving office. Today he went on a right-wing radio show and on the attack.
These people are sick. What they're doing is absolutely horrible. Look at Hillary Clinton. Look at what these other people got away with. You know, Obama took documents.
Legal experts think Trump's best hope now is a victory against Biden.
Do you think that if Trump wins the election, all this goes away?
There's no doubt. He's made that very clear. Even if the case is tried before the election, there will be appeals that are still pending. And there's no doubt that if Trump wins, he will take office on January 20th, and one of his first steps will be to order that the case be dismissed against him.
Trump's property manager will appear in court in Miami on Monday, but the full trial won't take place at least until May of next year. There is, however, another more serious federal case looming, centering around the turbulent events of January the 6th here in the Capitol. And that may result in the 45th president being charged with attempting to stage an insurrection.
Stop the steal! Stop the steal!
If Trump can avoid prison before the next election, those same polarising and disruptive forces might be at play again, this time supercharged by an even greater sense of injustice. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
Here, the anti-Brexit campaigner Gina Miller and its biggest champion, Nigel Farage, have regularly found themselves at loggerheads. But tonight, they're unlikely allies, both incensed at their treatment by the banking system. Following the closure of Mr Farage's Coutts account, Ms Miller has revealed she's been told her own party's account will be shut. Well, Martha's been looking into the story and joins me now. Martha, what can you tell us about this?
Well, Gina Miller is the campaigner who brought several legal cases against Brexit. And in November 2021, she opened a business account with Monzo for her True and Fair political party. But that was after being turned down by 9 other banks. And earlier this month, she received a message on the Monzo app telling her the account would be shut in September without any explanation. Monzo has since said that, like a lot of banks, it doesn't accept accounts from political parties, clubs or trusts, and that the account wasn't categorised correctly when it was opened. But Gina Miller says the financial rules about politically exposed persons are making it almost impossible for any new political party or person to enter politics.
Do these institutions have the right to just close down your business account, your personal accounts without telling you why? And secondly, if you deny new political parties access to these services, then you don't have a functioning democracy.
Well, this comes not long after Nigel Farage said that Coutts had shut his account because it disagreed with his political views. And in an unlikely twist, Mr Farage says he stands by Gina Miller on the issue of debanking and says the decision to close her party's account was just plain wrong. Now, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has already said the government's taking tough action to protect the free speech of bank customers. Meanwhile, Gina Miller's party has found a small institution to open an account with, but there's no guarantee they won't shut it as well in the future.
Martha, thank you. A 14-year-old boy is in police custody tonight after a 7-year-old girl was killed in a hit-and-run crash involving a motorcycle. Katniss Sellers-Never was struck while playing outside her home in Walsall last night and later died from her injuries in hospital. Her mother said her soul is aching. Police are still trying to find the bike involved in the crash. Already under threat, seabird populations have been devastated by continuing outbreaks of avian flu, and UK governments are being urged to do more to protect them. 190 outbreaks have been recorded across the UK since last October. The total death toll is unknown, but some estimates suggest up to 50,000 wild birds have been killed in the past 3 years, and millions of poultry have also been culled. There have been outbreaks both inland and along our shores. In the past month alone, hundreds of dead birds have washed up on beaches, including in Pembrokeshire, the Isle of Man, Merseyside and Aberdeenshire. The RSPB says 21 of the UK's 25 breeding seabird species have tested positive for the virus since 2021. And the charity's warning that it's left them on the brink.
It's a shocking sight that's become all too common on Scotland's east coast. Dead seabirds washing up on otherwise idyllic beaches, having succumbed to avian flu. More than 3,500 were picked up from Aberdeenshire beaches over the past few weeks. It's the third year the virus has tore through seabird colonies, affecting almost all breeding species in the UK.
It started in 2021 in great skewers and then in barnacle geese on the Solway. People did think that this was just a one-off, this was a blip, and everyone has been really surprised by how long it has continued. So we really are in sort of uncharted territory.
The red-listed kittiwake are being hit this year. Further down the Scottish east coast, rangers are monitoring the situation as it's moved into their area. The young will fledge in a few weeks' time, but only those whose parents have survived to feed them.
Avian flu is around all the year now and in this highly pathogenic form, but in the summer we had lots of seabirds coming back to breed on the islands and the cliffs. Therefore the seabirds are tightly packed and avian influenza spreads much more quickly amongst the colony.
More and more walkways like these near nesting sites are being closed to the public this summer. It's hoped by doing so they could limit the spread of avian flu to other breeding colonies, which are not yet affected. But there's little that can be done to control the virus, which is causing great concern for poultry farmers.
These birds are out and about, they're flying around, they do come inland, particularly at this time of year, and they'll start to land on ranges where you've got free range birds. It's that risk that they're going to bring infection into sheds is just such a worry.
Action groups are calling for the governments of the UK to urgently publish long overdue seabird conservation strategies to prevent sites like these from becoming the new norm. Louise Scott, News at 10, East Lothian.
Yorkshire Cricket Club has been fined and docked championship points over the Azim Rafiq racism scandal. Having previously admitted 4 charges, the club was fined £400,000, although most of that is suspended for 2 years. Yorkshire said it accepted the punishment. In another financial punishment handed out today, Chelsea have been fined £8.5 million for breaching fair play rules. The club's new owners discovered that during Roman Abramovich's time in charge, there were cases where only partial financial information was submitted. For England's Lionesses, chasing World Cup glory, it's now 2 matches, 2 goals, 2 wins. The result was the same as their opener, but the manner of victory was more convincing, a performance more in tune with those which carried them all the way at last summer's Euros. They are very nearly into the last 16, but may head there without another key player struck down by injury.
We all thought the lady was not for turning, but today, unusually, Serena Wiegman tinkered with her lineup, bringing in the exciting Lauren James and striker Rachel Daly, but at the back, where she played in the Euros. Back in the UK, fans were watching in their millions, whether at home or in bars like this one in East London. It was not a bad start to the morning. In East London, the fingernails were being shredded at an alarming rate.
Obviously losing Kira Walsh is a massive blow for England, but if we churn out results, it only has to be 1-0 and we'll keep going.
We love Lauren James. Lauren James.
Lauren James all the way.
Yeah.
It was nervy right to the end, but it was a second World Cup win and another clean sheet.
It was a dream, and at the moment it's a bit surreal. But yeah, I'm just happy that we won today and going to China with momentum.
We showed resilience, and we showed we also can fight and keep the nil. So I'm really happy with that performance. And if we would have done a little better, we would have been a little more lucky, we could have scored the second one.
The Lionesses haven't quite guaranteed a knockout place. That's the next challenge on Tuesday in their final group game against China. Steve Scott, News at 10.
From Sydney to Cape Town, and another good night's work from an England team in their opening game at the Netball World Cup. England got off to a perfect start with a dominant victory over Barbados. Their third favourites in the tournament and cruised to a 90-29 win. In their own match, Scotland suffered an agonising 55-49 defeat against Malawi. And finally, for 75 years, the Edinburgh International Festival brought the world an eclectic mix of artists and performers. What it never had, quite remarkably, was a woman or even a Scot running the show. That all changed with the appointment of award-winning violinist Nicola Benedetti as director. No stranger to breaking down barriers, she plans to use her time at the top to keep doing just that, and told Nina of her excitement at the challenge ahead.
In a rehearsal room today, but Nicola Benedetti will be doing this next week on stage at the Edinburgh International Festival, and a lot more besides.
But above all, we celebrate.
The acclaimed violinist is now also festival director, leading a lineup of world-class music, theatre, dance and opera. It's been a steep learning curve.
The dream for me was always to contribute to the cultural landscape of Scotland in the most full way that I possibly could, and suddenly you have an entire institution that has put on the world's greatest art year after year after year. So the challenge of it is phenomenal, but the fulfillment and excitement is also phenomenal.
She is the first Scot and the first woman to take the director role in a festival that has been running since 1947.
These things happen in the way that they happen. There's several gentlemen who have done the role that have strong Scottish ties or heritage.
But you're also the first female director, which is really surprising.
I just hope to do the position proud, but also to do well symbolically for women in positions of leadership.
Benedetti started playing the violin aged 4, led the National Children's Orchestra aged 8 and won BBC Young Musician of the Year aged 16. A Brit and Grammy Award winner, earlier this month she played at the Scottish service to mark King Charles's coronation. She has always championed classical music as a violinist. The festival role, though, is all-encompassing. Are you able to do the day job at all at the moment?
We all agreed at the festival, and myself and the people that I work with, that it was vital that I do continue playing. I don't think I'd win any favours in Scotland if I was like, let me do the festival and hang up the violin. That wouldn't do any of us any good.
She has proved a master of music. This summer, Nicola Benedetti is adding many more strings to her bow. Nina Nanar, News at 10.
And that is it for tonight. From all of us here, good night.
Today we'll see warmer temperatures